The hot wind blew dust across the refugee camp, making the tents shiver and the children cough. Captain Elias Kale moved carefully along the narrow paths between the makeshift shelters. His boots crunched over broken metal and cracked earth. He had seen many places like this, and his heart ached every time. People here had lost everything, homes, families, hope, but they were still alive. For now, that was something. Elias carried a small bag of food and water, moving from one tent to another. He greeted the camp residents politely, offering a small word of comfort where he could. His eyes were sharp, trained to notice what others might miss. Among the tired faces, he saw fear, hunger, and exhaustion, but sometimes he saw something else. A spark of life, or a hint of strength that refused to fade. As he handed a loaf of bread to a young mother, he noticed movement at the edge of the camp. A small figure crouched behind a pile of rubble. The figure was tiny, no more than 8 years old, and barely visible under the layers of dirt and ragged clothing. The girl's eyes were wide, dark, and wary. She hugged something close to her chest, a small pendant that glowed faintly in the sunlight as if alive. Elias felt a strange pull in his chest. He had learned over the years that the universe had a way of placing important people in his path. Something about this child felt different. Carefully, he crouched down and spoke softly. "Hey there, my name is Elias. Are you okay?" Then, as if sensing his sincerity, she inched closer, still clutching the glowing pendant. Elias noticed symbols engraved on it, strange lines that seemed to shift in the light. He did not recognize them, but his instincts told him they were important. He offered her some water. She sniffled, and her small fingers trembled as she took the cup. Elias watched her closely. "Do you have a name?" he asked quietly. The girl shook her head. I don't remember," she whispered. Her voice was soft but clear, with a hint of fear. Elias' heart tightened. Children like her were fragile, yet sometimes stronger than adults in ways people did not expect. "That's okay," he said. "You'll be safe with me for now. I think it's more than just jewelry." "Then we keep her safe," he said. "Whatever this is, it's hers, and I will not let anyone take her." I'm hungry." He sat beside her, trying to understand more about who she might be. He asked about her family, her home, but she could not remember. She could only describe fragments, a name, a color, a feeling. "I feel lost," she said finally, her small hands clutching the pendant. Elias nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "Sometimes people get lost, but the important thing is you are not alone anymore. I will help you find your way." And it carried data, information encrypted in a language that was both familiar and alien. "This isn't just jewelry," he murmured. "It's a message, a record, something important." In a galaxy of billions, something this rare would attract attention. And if someone came looking, the girl would be in danger. He sat back, thinking, how did she come to be here? Why was she alone? And what exactly was this pendant hiding? Questions swirled, but he knew one thing for certain. He could not leave her here, not while answers were unknown and threats possible. As night fell, the camp became quieter. The children slept under thin blankets while families huddled together. But Elias stayed awake, watching the stars through a torn section of the infirmary roof. The universe was vast, but sometimes even the smallest spark could change its course. And he felt, deep in his bones, that this child was one of those sparks. He returned to the girl who had curled up on a cot, her pendant glowing faintly against her chest. "Sleep now," he whispered. "You're safe. I will protect you." She nodded slightly, eyes closing, and for the first time Elias saw a hint of peace on her face. Even as he watched over her, his mind raced. He began running through scenarios, imagining who might come for her and what dangers lay ahead. The pendant was a clue, but to what? A lost civilization, a secret power, or something even more extraordinary? Elias' thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound outside, a movement in the shadows. His hand went to the small blaster at his belt, his senses alert. But when he looked, nothing was there. Still, he could not shake the feeling that someone somewhere was watching, waiting. He leaned back against the wall, keeping one eye on the sleeping girl. The camp was fragile like a candle in the wind, and she was the smallest flame of all. And yet somehow he knew she was special. There was a destiny in her eyes that no child should have to bear alone. Hours passed. The wind outside calmed, and the camp fell into a tense quiet. Elias finally allowed himself to close his eyes for a moment, but sleep was light, filled with dreams of distant stars and whispering voices. He dreamed of a galaxy in turmoil, of rulers and rebels, of battles fought not just with weapons, but with courage and wisdom. And in the center of it all, a small girl with dark eyes and a glowing pendant, waiting to step into a story that would change everything. When he awoke, the first rays of dawn were creeping over the horizon. The camp stirred, but the girl remained asleep. Elias took a deep breath, steeling himself. Today, he would begin the work of uncovering her past, understanding the pendant and protecting her from whatever, or whoever, might be coming. The day was only beginning, but he already knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And in that moment, Elias Kale, weary traveler and protector, made a silent promise to the child. Whatever the universe held, he would keep her safe. No matter the cost. The girl stirred slightly, opening her eyes and meeting his gaze. For the first time she smiled, a small, tentative smile, but real. And Elias knew with certainty that whatever lay ahead, the universe had placed them together for a reason. And somewhere far across the stars, forces began to stir, sensing that the lost child was not lost at all. The sun climbed higher over the refugee camp, casting long shadows across the cracked ground. Elias Kale had barely slept, but he did not complain. His eyes were trained on the child, the one who had entered his life like a quiet storm. She stirred in her small cot, the faint glow of the pendant reflecting in her dark eyes. Her name, or what he had chosen to call her, was Arya. It was simple, easy to remember, and felt right. Elias handed her a small cup of water and a piece of bread. She ate quietly, watching him carefully, as if studying his every move. Elias understood. Trust was earned, and Arya had learned the hard way that most adults brought nothing but harm. He had to prove he was different. "We need to understand what this is," he said softly, holding the pendant. The light pulsed in response, almost as if it had a heartbeat. He had spent the night scanning it with his portable device, and every readout only deepened the mystery. The symbols on its surface were ancient, older than any human civilization he had encountered. Yet somehow they spoke to him, suggesting knowledge, history, and a message waiting to be unlocked. Arya tilted her head, curious despite her caution. "Will it tell us about me?" she asked. Her voice was small, but there was an edge of hope in it. "I hope so," Elias replied, "and if it does, we'll be ready." People began shouting, and the air filled with fear. Elias grabbed Arya's hand and pulled her down to the ground behind a nearby supply crate. The sound of running boots and shouted orders grew louder. "They're coming," Elias whispered. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. His instincts told him this was no ordinary raid. These people were organized, trained, and dangerous. From their hiding spot, they saw shadowy figures moving quickly between tents. The attackers were dressed in dark uniforms, armed with weapons that glimmered under the sunlight. Elias' mind raced. He had seen mercenaries before, but these were different, precise, disciplined, and intent on finding something or someone. Elias looked down at Arya. She had clenched the pendant in her tiny hands. Despite the fear in her eyes, there was a spark of determination. He realized then that she was braver than many adults he had known. Her instinct to survive, to think quickly, was remarkable for a child. "We need to move," he said quietly. He scanned the area for a path that would take them to safety. The camp's perimeter was rough, filled with debris and narrow passages. Elias led her through the twisted paths, staying low and silent. As they ran, Elias noticed the attackers splitting into teams. Some were moving toward the infirmary, the same place where Arya had slept. His stomach tightened. They had to get out before they reached her previous location. "Can you run?" he asked. Arya nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Her small legs moved as fast as they could, weaving between the tents, dodging broken crates and barrels. Despite her fear, she kept pace, guided by Elias' calm instructions. They reached the edge of the camp, where the ground fell away into a dry, rocky slope. Elias knew the attackers would follow, but he also knew a narrow canyon nearby that could give them cover. He guided her down the slope, careful not to slip. The sun burned overhead and the dust made breathing difficult, but they pressed on. From behind, the sound of pursuit was relentless. The mercenaries were faster and better armed. Elias needed a plan, and fast. He scanned the terrain and spotted an abandoned transport vehicle, half buried in the sand. "Inside," he whispered. They climbed into the vehicle, hiding among old crates and broken machinery. Elias held his breath, listening as the attackers swept past, searching for any sign of them. The vehicle's metal body groaned under their weight, but it concealed them well enough for now. Arya pressed herself against Elias, shaking. "Why are they after me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elias did not answer immediately. How could he explain it to a child? That she was not just lost, but important, more important than anyone she had ever met could understand. Instead, he took her hand and squeezed it reassuringly. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I promise you we will figure it out and no one will hurt you while I'm here." The symbols had shifted slightly since last night, forming patterns he had not noticed before. His device confirmed it. The pendant was a beacon, not just a piece of jewelry. It carried information, directions, and perhaps even a warning. Whoever created it had intended for someone to find it. That someone, Elias realized with a mixture of awe and fear, might have been Arya. Hours passed as they moved cautiously through the rocky terrain, avoiding the main paths where patrols could find them. Elias rationed the small supplies they carried, sharing sips of water and bites of bread. Arya remained quiet, watching him, learning from his every movement. There was intelligence in her gaze, a quickness of thought that suggested she understood more than a typical child her age. Eventually, they reached a narrow canyon that offered some shelter from the sun and the patrols. Elias crouched beside Arya, catching his breath. He scanned the horizon. The camp was still in chaos, but for now they were safe. "Look," he said, pointing to the sky. A transport ship hovered in the distance, likely sent by whoever was attacking the camp. The attackers were not going to give up easily. Elias knew that if they wanted to survive, they had to leave the planet entirely. Arya looked at the sky with wide eyes. "Can we fly?" she asked. Elias smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and worry. "Yes, but it won't be easy. We'll need to be careful. And you'll need to trust me completely." Elias realized that the device he had brought to analyze it was only part of the puzzle. The pendant itself might hold the key to understanding her past and her future. As night fell, the canyon grew dark, shadows stretching across the walls. Elias built a small fire with what little he could find, keeping it low so it would not attract attention. Arya sat close, her hands warm against his. "They're still coming," she whispered. Elias nodded. "I know, but we're ready. You're stronger than you think, Arya. You've already survived more than most people will in a lifetime. And you, my little spark, are no exception." And why was Arya alone in a refugee camp, in a universe where children like her should never be forgotten? As dawn approached, Elias felt the first pangs of hope. They had survived the first attack, escaped the camp, and found a temporary safe place. But he knew the next steps would be more dangerous. They had to find a way off the planet and uncover the secret of Arya's pendant before anyone else did. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we leave this place. We find answers, and we make sure no one can ever hurt you again. And humans, we never give up." And little did they know, the pendant had begun to respond in ways neither of them could understand. Symbols glowed brighter, as if recognizing the courage, determination, and humanity in its small holder. The first step of their journey was over, but the real adventure, the one that would change the fate of galaxies, was only beginning. Elias settled in beside Arya, keeping his hand on hers. The fire flickered, casting long shadows across the canyon walls. He knew the next day would bring challenges unlike any they had faced. But for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that together they could overcome anything. Somewhere far across the stars, messages were being sent, ships prepared, and powerful beings began to stir. But Elias and Arya were ready. Not just because they had courage, but because they had something far stronger, humanity. And for now, that was enough. The morning sun burned weakly over the canyon, scattering long shadows across the rocky walls. Elias Kale was already awake, moving quietly so as not to disturb Arya. She still slept, curled around the glowing pendant, her small chest rising and falling with soft, steady breaths. Elias studied her for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of responsibility and awe. The universe had placed this child in his path, and he knew their journey was only beginning. The world outside the canyon was dangerous. The mercenaries who had attacked the camp were still searching, and they would not give up easily. Elias had watched the stars the night before, and in their quiet brilliance he had made a decision. They had to leave the planet entirely. Only then could they hope to uncover the mystery of Arya's pendant and protect her from the forces that sought her. He packed their meager supplies, water, dried rations, and a small portable scanner that could analyze the pendant. Arya stirred as he moved, blinking sleep from her dark eyes. "We have to leave soon," Elias whispered. "There's a ship waiting for us, but we must be careful. They will follow if they find us. And you are very strong." The wind whistled through the rocky walls, and the quiet was deceptive. Somewhere out there, the mercenaries were searching. He could feel it in the air, the tension, the faint hum of distant engines, the smell of dust disturbed by movement. Finally, the cargo ship came into view, half hidden behind a rocky outcrop. Elias smiled faintly. It was old and battered, but functional. More importantly, it could carry them away from the planet before anyone realized they were gone. Inside the ship, Elias set to work, running pre-flight checks. Arya watched closely, her small hands hovering over the controls with curiosity. Despite the danger, she seemed fascinated by the ship, by the instruments, by the possibility of moving among the stars. "You've never flown a ship before?" she asked. Elias chuckled softly. "I have," he said, "but nothing like this, and you'll learn too in time." Elias guided the ship carefully out of the canyon, keeping low to avoid detection. The rocky walls fell away, and the planet's surface stretched below them. He pushed the ship into a low orbit, scanning for any signs of pursuit. Far below, the camp had fallen silent. Elias knew the mercenaries were regrouping, but for now, they were safe. The stars stretched out ahead, and he felt a flicker of hope. The universe was vast, and humans, small, fragile, and underestimated, had a way of surviving against all odds. As they traveled, Elias studied the pendant again. The glowing symbols shifted slightly with each passing moment, reacting to the ship's motion, the energy of the engines, and even the presence of Arya. He realized that it was not just a container of information, it was alive in some sense, responding to her, guiding them. Arya watched him silently, her curiosity growing. "What is it?" she asked. Elias hesitated. "I think it's a key," he said finally. "A key to something very old, very important, and it belongs to you. I don't know all the details yet, but I do know one thing: someone out there wants it, and they will stop at nothing to get it." Humans had a way of rising to challenges, and this child, lost, alone, and scared, was already showing the courage of a seasoned survivor. He knew that the journey ahead would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. As the hours passed, they traveled through asteroid belts, dodging debris and navigating treacherous gravity fields. Elias taught Arya the basics of navigation, piloting, and scanning for threats. She absorbed the lessons quickly, showing an intelligence and intuition beyond her years. "You have a gift," Elias said, watching her adjust the ship's trajectory. "Most people take years to learn what you just did instinctively. By surviving, by thinking, by trusting me, that is more than many adults could do." And Elias knew that for her, it would become a place where she could grow, learn, and perhaps even change the fate of galaxies. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped. Elias froze, scanning the readouts. A fleet of small interceptors appeared on the edge of the sensor range. The mercenaries had tracked them farther than he expected. "They found us," he said quietly. "We have to act fast." Elias pushed the ship to its limits, weaving between asteroids and using sudden bursts of speed to confuse their pursuers. Arya watched him closely, learning from every movement. One of the interceptors fired, and a laser blast grazed the ship's hull. Elias cursed under his breath. "Hold on," he said. The ship shuddered, but they held together. He realized that their survival depended not on fighting the enemy head-on, but on outsmarting them. Using the ship's scanners, Elias found a narrow path through the asteroid field that the interceptors could not follow easily. He guided the ship through it, holding his breath as lasers whizzed past. Finally, they emerged on the other side, the interceptors trailing behind but unable to keep up. Arya exhaled slowly. "We did it," she asked, her voice a mixture of relief and awe. "Yes," Elias said, smiling. "We did it, and that is what humans do. We adapt, we survive, and we keep going, no matter how impossible it seems." Arya studied the pendant, fascinated by its glowing symbols. It pulsed gently in her hand, as if recognizing their courage, their determination, and their humanity. Finally, Elias decided to rest. He set the ship on a steady course, engaged the autopilot, and turned to Arya. "You've done well today," he said. "You've shown bravery, intelligence, and quick thinking. And that is what will keep you alive in this universe." The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with factions, mercenaries, and those who would exploit weakness. But he also thought about the potential of humans, the ingenuity, courage, and determination that allowed them to survive and thrive against impossible odds. Arya stirred in her sleep, clutching the pendant tightly. Elias watched her, feeling a quiet awe. This child, lost and alone, carried a destiny that could shape the fate of countless worlds. And yet it was their humanity, their courage, intelligence, and empathy that would guide them through the trials ahead. When she woke, Elias taught her basic piloting skills, how to read the sensors and how to think strategically. She learned quickly, her eyes bright with focus and determination. The journey was dangerous, but it was also a lesson in resilience, intelligence, and courage, the very qualities that defined humanity. As the days passed, they traveled farther from the planet, the stars stretching endlessly around them. Elias knew that the mercenaries would not give up, and that other threats awaited them in the galaxy. But he also knew that they were prepared, not just with weapons or technology, but with the qualities that had carried humans across countless challenges. Quick thinking, courage, and an unbreakable will. And somewhere far across the stars, hidden observers took note of their movement, the glowing pendant, and the small, determined girl who was beginning to understand her own power. The universe was vast, and the journey ahead would be perilous, but Elias and Arya were ready. Not just to survive, but to rise, because humans never give up. The stars stretched endlessly around them as the small cargo ship moved silently through the void. Elias Kale kept the vessel steady, scanning the sensors constantly. The universe was vast, beautiful, and dangerous all at once. Every twinkle of a distant sun reminded him of how small they were, yet how much courage and ingenuity humans could carry in such tiny bodies. Arya sat beside him, clutching the glowing pendant. Its light pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat, and Elias noticed that it seemed to react to her presence. She had begun asking questions, and he answered as best he could, teaching her about navigation, strategy, and survival. She absorbed every lesson with an intelligence and focus beyond her years. "We are not just running," Elias said, his voice low but firm. "We are learning. Every step, every decision, every action teaches us something. And that knowledge will keep us alive." Elias realized that it was guiding them, not just lighting their path, but showing them where to go. He traced the coordinates embedded in the device, which led them toward a system far beyond the usual trade routes, a place forgotten by most travelers, a stronghold hidden on a planet shrouded in storms and shadow. As they approached the planet, Elias' sensors detected unusual energy readings. Ancient technology, he realized, something hidden long ago, preserved in secret. The pendant pulsed faster as if recognizing the presence of this energy. Arya held it tightly, her small hands glowing faintly with reflected light. "This is it," Elias said quietly. "This is where we'll find answers." Elias guided the ship through narrow canyons, dodging lightning strikes and violent wind currents. Arya gripped the console, watching every movement, learning the delicate balance of piloting and survival. When they finally touched down on a flat ledge, Elias exhaled deeply. The stronghold lay ahead, carved into the rock, hidden from sensors and prying eyes. Ancient machines hummed faintly around the entrance, protected by centuries of clever engineering. It was not just a place, it was a fortress built for secrecy. They disembarked cautiously. Elias led the way, scanning for threats. The air was thick with energy, a mixture of static and something deeper, older, more powerful. Arya followed closely, her small figure moving with surprising confidence. The pendant pulsed again, guiding them to a hidden door, one that blended seamlessly into the rock. Elias pressed a sequence of buttons he had discovered in the ship's data archives. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing symbols, holographic screens, and machinery that seemed alive. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old metal. Arya gasped, her eyes wide. This is amazing," she whispered. Elias smiled. "It is, and it is ours for now. Here we can learn the truth about who you are and why the universe is searching for you." Elias placed it on a pedestal, and immediately the symbols on the walls came alive, forming a pattern that stretched across the room. The energy from the pendant flowed into the machines, activating ancient holographic displays. Images of stars, fleets, and rulers filled the room, telling stories without words. Arya stepped forward, mesmerized. I recognize this," she said, though she did not understand why. The symbols seemed to resonate with her as if they were part of her memory. Elias knelt beside her. "These records are very old. They belong to a civilization long thought lost. And you are connected to them in a way that no one else is." Elias shook his head gently. "Not exactly. She is your ancestor, the rightful ruler of the Galactic Empire, a civilization that once stretched across many star systems. The pendant, it was created to protect you, to guide you, to ensure you survive until the right time. More important than anyone could imagine, you are the missing heir. The universe needs you alive, not just to survive, but to restore balance, to guide people toward peace instead of war. But you must be careful. Those who took power while your family was gone will try to stop you." Arya stared at the holographic figure, her mind racing. She had been a lost child, hiding in a refugee camp, unsure of her own name. Now she was the heir to a galactic empire, a destiny far greater than she had ever imagined. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I will guide you, Arya. You will not face this alone. Together, we will learn everything we need to know to keep you safe." Humans have a way of rising to challenges. And you are a human, that is your greatest strength. She absorbed it quickly, her mind sharp and intuitive. As they worked, alarms suddenly blared across the ship's sensors. Elias froze. "They found us," he said grimly. Arya's eyes widened. "Who?" A fleet was approaching the planet, faster than anything he had seen. Arya's pendant pulsed violently, glowing brighter than ever. "We have to prepare," Elias said. "We can't fight them head-on, not yet, but we can outsmart them. Humans have survived against overwhelming odds before, and we will do it again. Strategy is as important as strength." As night fell over the planet, the storm clouds swirling above, Elias and Arya prepared. The fleet drew closer, their intentions clear. But they were ready. Humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, thinkers, and fighters in ways that others could not anticipate. And Arya, the lost child now heir to an empire, was ready to step into her destiny. The pendant pulsed once more, sending a wave of light across the chamber. Arya felt a surge of confidence and courage. She looked at Elias. "I'm ready," she said. Elias smiled. "I know you are, and together we will face whatever comes next." They had strategy, courage, and the human spirit on their side. And in that moment, the universe began to shift, as if acknowledging that a new power had arisen. A small girl, once lost in a refugee camp, was now the key to restoring balance to the galaxy. The stage was set. The battle for the future of the Empire was about to begin. Elias and Arya stood together, ready to face the storm. The human spirit, resilient and brilliant, would shine brighter than any fleet, any weapon, any force in the galaxy. And in that shining moment, they knew that nothing, not even the vastness of space, not even the power of enemies, could extinguish the courage, intelligence, and determination of humanity. The storm raged outside the hidden stronghold, lightning flashing across the sky and illuminating the jagged cliffs below. Elias Kale tightened his grip on the console, his eyes scanning the incoming fleet. Hundreds of ships glinted menacingly against the darkness, all converging on the small planet. The usurpers had arrived, and their intent was clear. They would not leave without Arya. Arya stood beside him, her small frame glowing faintly as the pendant pulsed with energy. She had spent hours studying the archives, absorbing strategies, political histories, and records of her ancestors. The knowledge flowed into her not as something heavy or burdensome, but as guidance. She now understood what she was and what was at stake. Elias looked at her. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Arya nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I am. This is my chance, my duty. Not just with strength, but with intelligence, courage, and heart. We will outsmart them, and we will survive." Elias activated the stronghold's defenses, ancient but powerful machines that hummed to life with the pendant's energy. The walls glowed with protective shields, the cannons lined the perimeter, and holographic sensors scanned the skies for threats. Arya's hands hovered over the console, feeling the pendant's energy flow into the systems. It pulsed with each decision, each calculation guiding her small but determined mind. Elias watched in awe. She had become more than a child. She was a strategist, a leader, and a beacon of hope. The first shots fired. Lasers cut across the sky, striking the shields with sparks and flashes of light. Elias and Arya moved with practiced coordination, directing the stronghold's defenses to intercept and outmaneuver the attackers. The usurpers were powerful, but their confidence was their weakness. They assumed an ordinary child could not lead. They were about to be proven wrong. Arya pointed to a section of the fleet approaching from a blind spot. "There. There's a gap in their formation," she shouted. Elias smiled. "Exactly. Humans notice things others overlook. Let's take advantage." Arya's pulse quickened and the pendant's glow intensified. She felt a surge of clarity, as if the knowledge and courage of her ancestors were flowing into her. She pointed to another weak spot. "There, another opening." Ship after ship of the usurpers fell, outmaneuvered not just by machines, but by the intuition, courage, and intelligence of humans, ordinary humans. Hours passed in a tense blur. The storm outside mirrored the battle in space. Lasers flashed, explosions shook the ground, and yet Elias and Arya held their ground. Each decision was calculated, precise, and creative. Arya's understanding of the pendant's power had grown. It now allowed her to anticipate movements, guide defenses, and make choices with speed and accuracy beyond normal human capability. But the usurpers were persistent. They launched a final wave, larger and more dangerous than the others. Elias glanced at Arya. "This is it. The final push. Stay focused. We have to follow my lead." Elias placed it carefully on the control console, letting its energy expand through the stronghold. The final wave of attackers approached, their confidence faltering in the face of the human resolve radiating from the chamber. Arya stepped forward, her small hands glowing with the pendant's energy. "I am Arya," she said, her voice steady. "I am the heir. And I will not be defeated." She was a leader, a strategist, and a force to be reckoned with. The usurper fleet faltered further, their ships colliding in confusion. Arya guided the defense systems with precision, outmaneuvering every attempt to breach the stronghold. Ship after ship fell, destroyed by strategy, skill, and human determination. Finally, the remaining ships fled, unable to continue against the brilliance, courage, and ingenuity of their opponents. The storm outside began to subside, as if the universe itself acknowledged the victory of humans. Elias approached Arya. "You did it," he said quietly. Arya looked at the glowing pendant, then at the empty sky where the fleet had once been. "We did it," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "Humans always find a way, not because we are the strongest, but because we are clever, brave, and never give up. And you are the best of us." The archives, previously dormant, activated fully, revealing political records, fleet positions, and the history of her ancestors. She was the rightful heir. The universe had placed the lost child in Elias' care not by accident, but because she was destined to restore the Empire. Elias watched as Arya absorbed the knowledge. Her mind was sharp, her instincts perfect, and her courage unyielding. She had grown in strength, intelligence, and confidence. Humans had always faced impossible odds, and they had always risen. Now she embodied that very spirit. Days later, Arya addressed the Empire's council via hologram. Her voice was calm, confident, and commanding. She exposed the treachery of the usurper and revealed the strength and intelligence of humanity that had protected her. The council, amazed by her courage, wisdom, and strategic brilliance, recognized her as the rightful ruler. Elias stood behind her, silent but proud. The journey had begun with a child lost in a refugee camp, alone and frightened. Now she was the leader of a galactic empire, prepared to guide countless worlds toward justice and peace. The universe had watched, and it had seen that humans, ordinary, underestimated, and relentless, could change the course of galaxies. It was not strength alone that had won the day, but ingenuity, courage, and morality. Humans had survived where others failed, and now humanity had shaped the destiny of the stars. Arya turned to Elias. "We did it. The Empire is safe for now. And you will lead it wisely. Humans have a way of making the impossible possible. You are living proof." But she also felt the quiet, steady strength of humanity in her heart, the courage, intelligence, and determination that had brought her this far. Elias and Arya looked out over the holographic projections of the Empire, imagining the possibilities ahead. They had survived danger, evaded enemies, and uncovered secrets older than most civilizations. And through it all, humanity had triumphed, not through fear, violence, or domination, but through cleverness, courage, and heart. In the quiet moments that followed, Elias spoke softly. "The universe is vast, Arya, dangerous, yes, but full of opportunity. And humans, we will always find a way to rise, no matter what comes. I will lead with courage, intelligence, and compassion, just like humans always do." And Arya, heir to a galactic empire, had shown that courage, intelligence, and the human spirit could shape the destiny of worlds. The journey was far from over, but the first great victory had been won. And for Elias, watching Arya stand tall, he knew the universe would never underestimate humanity again. For humans, he thought, could rise against any odds, protect the vulnerable, and change the course of history. And now the galaxy would see it in full. The storm cleared, the stars shone brighter than before, and a new era began. One led not just by blood or technology, but by the indomitable spirit of humanity. And somewhere deep in the universe, the pendant pulsed quietly, as if smiling, knowing that the galaxy was in good hands.